Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I wanted to talk about just high-level grammar concepts, how to tackle those when you're just starting out, and what to focus on without getting too overwhelmed. So, when you're first starting to learn a language, I think it's very important not to be too obsessed with grammar and mastering all elements of the grammar process, especially at the beginning. I'm really kind of the opinion that you should really try to learn grammar a lot more naturally as you read and experience the language more often. But I do think it's important to occasionally just kind of review these concepts to understand that they're there. And as you advance more in the language, you can kind of dig a little bit deeper into just reading and understanding some of these concepts, because once you at least know that they're there, you're able to notice it when you're listening or reading, which are going to reinforce that study. So what should you focus on if you're just kind of starting out with the grammar process? Well, I think the biggest thing to focus on is those really high-level components, those high-level aspects that you're going to get your most bang for your buck. So what are those, right? Well, you're probably going to have to talk in the present tense or the future or the past. Start there, right? Because you're going to notice those things a ton versus maybe some obscure stem change rule for a verb, right? Or a specific verb. Hit those really big concepts that you're going to see over and over again. So a couple of those I would suggest would be like how to talk in each of the tenses, right? How do I talk in the future, in the past, in the present? And you don't need to necessarily master them, but if you've at least read through that once, and you at least have a kind of a grasp of how it is structured in whatever language you're learning, when you're reading and you're doing other things, you're going to notice that, and you'll at least be aware of that. And then when you want to dive deeper and you see those things, you can go back and dive deeper. I think some other things that are maybe useful, and of course it depends on the language, is if you have like different cases, like the dative case or accusative, like in German or in Russian, something like that. And I think that, being at least aware of those is important. Maybe you don't need to memorize all of the tables, at least initially or at all, but just be aware of those things. Like the big concepts, just read through it just so that you're aware of it. And I just don't think you should expect to just absorb it all at once. It's going to definitely take time. It's going to take time to memorize some of those concepts or just to understand them. And it's going to seem really funky and weird, especially with things like word order, where when you first see kind of a different word order from English or something like that, it can be very overwhelming. But what you'll find is over time, the more that you read and you are involved with the language, the more you accept those components of the language, you get comfortable with it, and it doesn't seem so strange anymore. So a lot of it's just this exposure and time with the language. And so don't be obsessed about nailing those concepts down. Now, if you're kind of a little bit more advanced and you really want to hit the grammar, then yeah, I think that kind of trying to memorize some of those tables or things like that can be useful. But especially at the beginning stage, definitely just review it ever so often. And you don't need to be obsessed and master like one tense or one thing before moving to the next grammar concept, or before you learn more vocabulary or start to read or anything like that. I think the key is just kind of have this steady review process. And it doesn't have to be every day or every week, really. It's just, you really want to just occasionally review it, right? If there's kind of a list of things that are important to memorize in a language, whether that's like grammar cases or something like that, maybe look over it once a week. And eventually, after enough repetitions, you're going to actually have that table memorized in your head. Or you're at least just going to keep being exposed to it. You're going to read that explanation over and over and over again, and eventually it's just going to start clicking and making a lot more sense. It's going to start becoming a lot less intimidating. And also, the more that you're aware of those things and you're noticing them, it's going to pop up better in your noticing of those concepts in the language, right? Like you might be able to review a certain grammar rule once, and you won't really listen or you won't really notice it when you're doing certain activities, but after enough times, you probably will. So what's the main points here? Definitely at least be aware of a lot of the grammar concepts, but don't be obsessed about mastering every single component of it. Those things will come with time, and eventually, after enough exposure, you're going to get those concepts down. And just remember, review it slowly and don't be too intimidated. This is Matt. What do you think about grammar concepts, and how do you review them? And I will see you in the next video. Take care.